Welcome to Dad's Revenge, where quiet men prove that patience is a strength. Each story here is about a father who is underestimated, disrespected, or betrayed by the very people who should be protecting him, and how that father finds his own way to mend things. Welcome to today's story. 45 years I opened locks for this city. Widows called me when they could not open their husbands' safes. I went. I knelt on their carpets with my ear against cold steel, and I listened, and I hummed the way my mother hummed over a stove, and after a while the lock told me what it wanted. Then I stood up, and I stepped back, and I let them look inside alone. I saw what was in those safes. Love letters that were not from a wife. Money nobody knew about. Sometimes nothing at all, which is the loudest thing a safe can hold. I never said one word. Not once. Not in 45 years. That was the man I was. The morning they read my wife's will, I had already been working 2 hours. Miss Ophelia Nesmith over on Ann Street buried her husband in September, and she could not get into his gun cabinet, and she did not want a stranger touching it. So she called me. Everybody in this town calls me. My name is Terrence Banks, and I have been the man who opens things since I was 24 years old. I knelt down on her carpet. My knees are 69 years old, and they let me know it. I put my ear against the door, and I put 3 fingers on the dial, and I started to hum, and nothing came back. I want you to understand what I mean by that. A lock talks to you through your fingertips. There is a place inside the wheel pack where the drive cam catches, and it is not a sound. It is a feeling like the smallest bump in the world. For 45 years, I could feel that bump through a 1/4 inch of hardened steel. That morning, I felt cold metal, and I felt my own knuckles aching, and that was all. I sat back on my heels, and I looked at my hands. Big hands, cracked across the palms. 2 fingernails gone black years ago and never come back. These hands put a Mosler safe into the New Hanover County Courthouse in 1979, when I was 26 years old and thought I would live forever. I tried again. I took my time. I let Miss Nesmith go put on a pot of coffee because a man does not want an audience when his hands are failing him. It took me 26 minutes. It should have taken 4. The cabinet swung open, and there was a shotgun in there, and a savings bond, and a photograph of a woman who was not Miss Nesmith. I stood up. I stepped back. I let her look inside alone. She paid me $40, and I did not take it, and she pushed it into my apron pocket anyway, and I drove to my daughter's house to hear what my wife had left behind. Lillian Banks was my wife for 44 years. She was a clerk at the county courthouse for 31 of them. She cut coupons out of the Sunday paper, and she drove a Buick with 190,000 miles on it, and she hummed the same way I do, which is how I knew the first month I met her that I was going to marry her. She died on a Tuesday. We buried her on a Friday. And on Monday morning, we all sat down in the living room of a house I had paid for, and a lawyer named Conrad Kahn came in and did not sit down. He never sits down. He stood by the fireplace with a folder against his chest like a man holding a door closed. My daughter Celine sat on the sofa with her back very straight, 41 years old, law degree. I paid for that degree in cash, semester by semester, and I want to be honest with you about where the cash came from because it matters later. It came out of coin boxes. I have 4 laundromats in this city, and every single dollar of that girl's education came out of the bellies of washing machines on the north side, counted at my kitchen table, rolled into paper tubes. She has not touched my hands since she passed the bar. Beside her sat her husband, Julian Cross, 44 years old, a financial advisor, a fine-looking white man in a soft gray sweater, and he stood up when I came in and took my hand in both of his hands the way you hold something you found on the sidewalk. "Pops," he said, "how you holding up?" I have never liked being called Pops. I told him that once, 6 years ago, gently, the way you tell a young man something. He laughed and said he would work on it. He has called me Pops every day since. Conrad Kahn opened the folder. "Mrs. Banks was of sound mind," he said. "She drafted this 18 months ago. I will read it as she wrote it. 18 months ago." I did the arithmetic while he read, and the arithmetic did not sit right. 18 months ago, Lillian was fine. 18 months ago, she was standing at our stove making rice, humming, telling me the dryer in shop number 3 was walking across the floor again. To my daughter, Celine Banks Cross. Con Red, I leave the residence on Chestnut Street. I leave all 4 locations operating under the name Banks Wash House. And I leave the balance of all savings, investment, and retirement accounts in the amount of $3,800,000. The room did not make a sound. Celine's mouth came open, just slightly, and Julian Cross put his hand flat on his own chest like a man taking an oath, and he breathed out, and I watched him try very hard to look sad about it. $3,800,000. I had never in my life seen a number like that attached to my name or hers. I had never seen a number like that attached to anybody I knew. We ate off a folding table until 1991. To my husband, Terrence Banks, Con Red. I sat forward. I leave storage unit number 118, located at the Castle Hayne Road self-storage facility. The contents thereof, in their entirety. He stopped. He turned the page over. He turned it back. That was all of it. That was the whole sentence. Then he reached into the folder, and he brought out one more piece of paper, and he held it out to me, and he did not look at my face when he did it. It was a bill, past due, storage fees 6 months unpaid, $214. And that is when my son-in-law laughed. It came out of him fast, one hard bark of it before he could get his hand up, and then he caught it. I saw him catch it. I watched him take his face apart and put it back together in about half a second, and when it was finished, it was a kind, concerned face, a good face, the face of a man who loves his wife's father. "Sorry," he said. "Sorry, that is not funny. That is not funny at all." He came around the coffee table, and he crouched down in front of my chair the way you crouch in front of a child. "Listen to me," he said. "Nobody is putting you out. You hear me? We will take care of Pops." He took the storage key off the lawyer's folder, and he laid it in my palm, and he closed my fingers over it, and he patted the back of my hand twice. "Go count your quarters," he said. He was smiling when he said it. Celine was looking at the window. I stood up. My knees popped, and the sound was loud in that room. I did not say anything, because I am not a man who says things. I picked up my jacket off the arm of the chair, and I walked out of the house I had paid for with 2 hands and 30 years, and I did not slam the door, because a slammed door tells them they hurt you. I got in my truck. I put the storage key in my apron pocket, and my fingers touched something else in there, something small, something brass. I had forgotten it was there. I had been forgetting it was there for 4 years. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my truck outside a house that was not mine anymore until the street lights went off, and then I drove to work because a man goes to work. 6 in the morning, Banks Wash House number 3, corner of 4th and Red Cross North Side. I have opened that door at 6 in the morning for 22 years. There was a sign in the window. It was one of those plastic real estate signs, red and white, zip-tied to the security gate, with the cheap little ties you buy in a bag of 100. For sale. And under that, a phone number that was not my phone number. They had done it overnight. My wife had been in the ground for 4 days. I stood on that sidewalk in the cold, and I looked at that sign for a long time. And I want to tell you what I felt, but I do not think I felt anything yet. That is not strength. That is what happens to a man when the ground goes out from under him. The feeling comes later, and it comes at 3 in the morning, and it takes its time. Mac Rivera was sitting on the curb. Mac is 26. He runs my overnight shift, has for 2 years, and he came to me when nobody else in this city would hire him because of a thing he did when he was 19 that I am not going to tell you about because it is his to tell. The boy can hear a bad bearing in a washer from across the room. He does not need a meter. He puts his hand flat on the lid and he listens. He had a wrench in his hand. He was just holding it. "Mr. Banks," he said. He stood up. "Mr. Banks, I got a text at 5 o'clock. Let me see it." He gave me his phone. It was 3 lines long. It said that ownership of the Banks Wash House locations had transferred, that all overnight positions were being eliminated effective immediately, and that he should not report to the premises. It was not even signed. It just said management. "I have been standing here since 5:20, Max said. "I did not know where else to go." That is the part that got me. Not the sign, not the text. A grown man standing on a corner in the dark with a wrench in his hand because the only place he had to be had been taken from him by a message on a telephone. I called my daughter. It rang 4 times and went to her voicemail. The professional one. The one that says, "You have reached the offices of." I called again. Same thing. I did not leave a message. I have never in my life left a message for my own child, and I was not going to start on that sidewalk. "Go home, Mac," I said. "Mr. Banks, go home. I will call you." He did not go home. I watched him in my mirror, and he was still standing there when I turned onto Castle Hayne Road. Now let me tell you about that road, because you need to see it. Castle Hayne Road runs north out of the city, past the tire places and the church signs and the one barbecue stand that has been closed since before the pandemic. The self-storage facility sits back off the road behind a chain-link fence, and it is 4 long rows of orange roll-up doors under a security light that has one bulb out. Weeds coming through the asphalt. A man in a booth who did not look up when I drove in. Unit 118 was in the back row on the end. I sat in my truck for a minute with the engine off. I want to be honest with you. I did not go there full of hope. I went there because I had $214 of somebody's money to settle, and because it was the only thing in this world that had my name on it. I thought I was going to open that door and find my wife's mother's dishes. I thought I was going to find a broken sewing machine and 40 years of Christmas decorations, and I thought I was going to stand there and finally understand that the woman I loved had spent her last year of life making a fool of me. I got out. I reached into my apron pocket for the flashlight, and something fell out and hit the asphalt with a little sound. I looked down. It was a key blank, brass, about the length of my thumb, unfinished, no teeth cut into it, just the smooth blank edge, the way they come out of the box. Stamped on the bow in the little numbers they use was the number 118. I picked it up. I stood there in that lot with that piece of brass in my fingers, and I turned it over 1 time, and I put it back in my pocket. And I did not think about it. I want you to hear me say that. I put it back in my pocket, and I did not let myself think about it. And I had been doing that for 4 years, and I was very good at it. I unlocked the padlock on Unit 118. It was a cheap disc lock. It took me 11 seconds, and I noticed the way you notice a nail in a board, that the hasp was mounted on the outside. It has to be. Every storage unit in America is like that. A door like that can only be locked from the outside, and it can only be locked by somebody standing where I was standing. I did not think about that either. Not then. I got my hands under the roll-up door, and I lifted, and my shoulders told me exactly how old I was. And the door went up on its track with a long, rusty scream that I heard bounce off the units on the other side of the row. The light came in. Boxes. Banker's boxes. The kind with the lift-off lids and the rope handles. Stacked 4 high and 6 deep in rows, with an aisle down the middle wide enough for 1 man to walk. They were not thrown in there. They were shelved. They were squared up. Every lid had a strip of masking tape across the front and a year written on it in my wife's handwriting. I stood at the mouth of that unit and I counted the stacks, and I stopped counting at 11, and I would find out later there were 200 boxes in there. 200 boxes! Lillian never once mentioned this place to me. Not one time in 44 years. And at the end of the aisle, all the way in the back, something big was standing under a canvas tarp. Taller than the boxes, shoulder height on me, maybe more. Square. I walked down that aisle. My boots were loud on the concrete. I took hold of the corner of the tarp, and I pulled it down, and the dust came off it in a sheet, and I stepped back, and I looked at what my wife had left me. It was a safe, not a gun cabinet, not a firebox. A safe. Gray-green enamel worn down to the metal on the corners, 4 bolts you could see, a spoke handle, and a black dial with a fine white ring around it. I knew the model before I could read the plate. Mosler, 1961, and I knew this one. I knew this exact one, the way you know a face across a room after 30 years. Because I had knelt in front of it on a marble floor when I was 26 years old, with the county maintenance supervisor standing over me. And I had set the combination myself. I put my hand flat on that safe door, and it was as cold as a church pew in February. Then I knelt down. It took me a while. I got one knee to the concrete and then the other, and I put my left ear against the steel, and I put 3 fingers on the dial, and I closed my eyes. You have to understand what a safe like that is. A Mosler from 1961 is not a box. It is a machine. There are 4 wheels inside stacked on a spindle, and each one has a notch cut in the edge. And when all 4 notches line up in a row, a little steel arm called the fence drops into that gap and the bolts let go. That is all a combination is. It is a man asking 4 wheels to agree with each other. And in 1979, a boy who was 26 years old set those wheels himself. I was working for a company on Market Street then, $2.80 an hour. They sent me out to the new Hanover County Courthouse to install a record safe in a basement room with a marble floor and a radiator that banged all winter, and the maintenance supervisor stood behind me the whole time with his arms folded, because in 1979, a man like him did not leave a man like me alone in a county building. I remember that floor. I remember my knees on it. And when it came time to set the combination, he said, "Put in anything. Nobody will ever use this thing anyway." So I put in my brother's birthday. That night, I told him about it. We were sitting on the tailgate of his truck outside our mother's house on 9th Street, and I told him I had hidden his birthday inside a county safe, down in a basement where they kept their records, and that it would sit down there long after both of us were gone. Jabari laughed so hard he had to set his beer on the bumper. He said, "So a piece of me is in the courthouse now." He said it like it was the funniest thing he had ever heard in his life. The 2nd of March. 1953. Jabari was 3 years ahead of me, and he was the one who carried me on the handlebars, and he was the one who signed the papers when our mother could not read them, and I am going to tell you about him. But not yet. I need you to see the rest of this first. Right, left, right, left. That is how you dial it. That safe has been sitting in county storage, and then in an auction house, and then in a rented room on Castlehane Road. And no county clerk ever changed that combination, because no county clerk ever knew there was one. I turned the dial. 3, then 2, then 5, then 3. Slow, clean. I felt the wheels take. I brought the spoke handle down. Nothing. The handle would not move. Not a hair. I sat back on my heels. I told myself my hands were cold. I blew into them and I rubbed them together, and I noticed that the tips of my fingers were still numb from the cold morning, and I put them back on the dial. I did it again. Slower. Nothing. Now, I want to describe something to you, and I want you to sit with me in that storage unit for a second. I have opened 10,000 locks. I opened a bank vault in Kinston in 1991 that 2 men from out of state had already given up on. Firemen have called me. Police have called me. And I knelt on that concrete floor with my own safe in front of me, the safe I built with my own 2 hands, and it would not open. And a voice came into my head, and the voice was not mine. It was my son-in-law's voice, saying the word "Pops," in that soft way he says it, the way you talk to a dog that is getting old. I thought, what if I am wrong? What if the number is not the number? What if I have been carrying the wrong number in my head for years and never had cause to check it? What if it has already started and nobody has told me? My hands were shaking. 69 years old, on my knees in a storage unit, and my hands were shaking. So I stopped. I sat all the way down on that cold floor with my back against the boxes, and I put my hands under my arms to warm them, and I closed my eyes, and I hummed. Just low, the way I do. The way my mother did over a stove, and the way my wife did over a sink, and after a while, my shoulders came down out of my ears. Then I got back up on my knees, and this time I did not use my fingertips. I used the back of my hand, the flat part below the knuckles, where the skin is thin and the cold gets in. And I turned that dial by feel, the way a blind man reads a wall. 3, 2, 5, 3. The 4th wheel took, and I felt it. I felt the fence drop. I brought the handle down, and the bolts came back with a sound like a man clearing his throat, and the door of that safe swung out toward me 46 years after I closed it. There was no money in there. I want to say that plainly, because I know what you are thinking. I was thinking it too. I had spent the drive out there telling myself I did not care about money, and I had been lying the way a man lies when he is tired and hungry and has just been laughed at in his own living room. There was no cash. No bonds, no jewelry. There were 7 folders. Leather. The old kind with a flap and a string tie, stacked flat on the bottom shelf edges, squared up the way she squared everything, and laid across the top of them, standing against the back wall so it would be the first thing I saw, was an envelope. My name was on the front of it in her hand. Terrence. I did not open it right away. I sat down on the concrete with my back against the safe, and I held that envelope with both hands, and I looked at the letters of my own name. And I want to tell you that my wife had been gone 5 days, and this was the first time I had heard her voice. Then I opened it. My Terrence, it said. If you are reading this, then you found the room and you opened the box. And I need you to know that I did not choose that box because it was strong. I chose it because you are the only man alive who can open it. Not the only man who could learn how. The only man who already knows. I have been lying to you for 6 years. I stopped there. I read that line 4 times. I have been lying to you for 6 years, and I am not going to ask you to forgive me for it, because I would do it again. And a woman should not ask for pardon for a thing she would do again. There are 7 folders in that safe. Read the 4th one first, Terrence. You have to read it first. I did not read the 4th folder first. I want you to know that up front, because I have thought about it every day since, and I still cannot give you a clean reason. My wife wrote it twice. Read the 4th one first. You have to read it first. And I sat there on that concrete with her letter in my lap, and I reached past it, and I picked up the one on top. Maybe I wanted to be ready. Maybe I thought I could work my way up to it, the way you work your way into cold water. I have opened locks for 45 years. I know exactly what a man is doing when he takes the long way around. Folder number 1. Inside was a foreclosure file. Not the whole court file, but somebody had built one out of copies and built it careful. Tax notice, certified mail receipt, order of sale, deed. The name on it was Odessa Pruitt, 1204 Campbell Street. I knew that house. I have driven past that house 4,000 times. It is a little green thing with a porch swing and a satsuma tree in the side yard, and I did not know the woman, but I knew the tree. Miss Pruitt owed the county $940. $940 on a house that had been in her family since her grandfather bought it. There was a notation in the file about a clerical correction to the parcel identification number, and I read that page 3 times before I understood what it was telling me. Somebody had changed the number. And when the number changed, the notices went to the old address, and the old address was a lot on Nixon Street that has been an empty lot since Hurricane Fran. She never got the letters. She could not answer letters she never got. Order of expedited sale 60 days. Sold at commissioner's auction for $11,400 to a limited liability company out of Raleigh. And the deed, 6 weeks later, transferring that property to Meridian Coastal Holdings. That house is worth $210,000 today. There is a wine bar on that block now. I set folder 1 down. I put my hand on folder 4. I felt the leather under my fingers, and I moved my hand, and I picked up folder 2. I am telling you the truth. That is what I did. Folder 2. Willie Ray Tillery, 715 Swan Street. $1,160 in back taxes. Same clerical correction. Same wrong address. Same 60-day sale. Folder 3. Bernice and Curtis Hollowell, 908 Nixon Street. They had a payment plan with the county. There was a signed payment plan in that folder. It did not matter. Somebody keyed it in as delinquent anyway, and by the time Mr. Hollowell drove down to the courthouse with his receipts in a shoebox, the sale had already gone through. There was a photograph clipped to the inside of that folder. Somebody had printed it off the internet. It was that house boarded up with a sign in the yard. Now my hands were doing something. You have to understand, a man like me does not shout. My whole life I have watched other men shout, and I have thought that is a lot of noise for very little work. But I noticed that I had picked up a pen off that floor at some point, and I was clicking it. Click, click, click. And I put it down. I put my hand on folder 4 again, and again I did not open it. I skipped it. I told myself I was building a picture. I told myself I needed the pattern first. And I went to folder 5, and then 6, and then 7, and I sat on that cold floor for 2 hours, and I built the picture. Alvin Priolo, 1129 Bladen Street. Doretha Mills, 602 Kidder Street. The Sanderlin family, 411 9th Street. That one hurt because my mother lived on 9th Street, and I ran up and down that block barefoot in 1962. 7 houses, 7 families, all of them within 9 blocks of the laundromat where I count my quarters. Every single one the same shape. A small debt, a clerical correction nobody asked for, a notice mailed to a dead address, a 60-day expedited sale under a statute that is supposed to be for abandoned property. And then the deed goes to a shell company, and 6 weeks later, the shell company hands it to Meridian Coastal Holdings, and Meridian is building condominiums on the river. Not one of those debts was over $1,200. Not one of those families was rich. Every one of them was black. And every one of them was on the north side where I've lived my entire life, and I never heard a word about any of it. Because nobody calls a man to tell him his neighbors are being taken by paperwork. Paperwork does not make noise. Now here is the part I want you to sit with. Those files were copies, county copies, and every one of them had a little pencil mark in the top corner, a date in my wife's hand. Lillian worked at that courthouse for 31 years. She sat behind a window and she stamped things and she said good morning to every soul who walked through that door. And I used to tease her that she had the most boring job in North Carolina. She was making copies. For 20 years, she was making copies. And I thought about her handbag. That big brown handbag she carried for years, the one with the broken clasp that she would not let me fix. I offered 100 times, I am a man who fixes things. And she would say, leave it, Terrence, it opens fine for me. I used to lift that bag off the kitchen chair to move it out of the way, and I would think, what does this woman keep in here? Bricks? I said that to her once. She laughed and she said receipts. 200 boxes. She had been carrying them out of that building a folder at a time in her handbag and driving them to a rented room on Castle Hayne Road and coming home to make me rice. And she never said one word to me about it. I was still sitting on that floor when my phone rang. I did not know the number. I answered it because I am a man who answers his phone. Mr. Banks? A voice said. Smooth, young, comfortable. I hope I am not catching you at a bad time. My name is Brendan Delgado. I am with Meridian Coastal Holdings. I did not say anything. Sir, first, I am so sorry for your loss, truly. Your wife was a fixture in this community. He let a little silence go by, the professional kind. Mr. Banks, I will be direct with you because I think you are a direct man. We understand that Mrs. Banks maintained a storage unit on Castle Hayne Road and that its contents have passed to you. The security light outside that unit came on. It was getting dark, and I had not noticed. We would like to purchase the contents, he said. Sight unseen, as is. $90,000 wired to any account you named tonight. $90,000 for a room full of old paper from a company that did not know me on the 5th day after my wife was buried. Mr. Banks, are you there? I am here, I said, and I looked down. My hand was resting on folder number 4. I told Brendan Delgado no. I told him no on the phone that night, and he took it well, the way a man takes it well, when he already has the next move in his pocket. He came in person the next morning. Black sedan, brand new, and he parked it in the middle of the aisle like the lot belonged to him. He got out in a gray suit with no overcoat, and he came walking down that row of orange doors and a pair of Italian shoes right through the puddle that never dries up in front of Unit 114. I watched him look down at his own shoe. I watched him decide not to react to it. I had the door of my unit halfway up, and I was sitting on a folding chair in the mouth of it, drinking coffee out of a thermos cup. 69 years old, work coat, boots. He looked past me first. He actually looked past me into the unit at the boxes before his eyes came back and found me sitting there. Are you the caretaker here? He said. That is what he said to me. I am the man you called, I said. Something moved behind his face. Not embarrassment, just an adjustment, the way a man adjusts a mirror. Mr. Banks? He put out his hand. I did not take it, and he brought it back and slid it into his pocket like that was where he had been sending it all along. Brendan Delgado, Meridian, I know who you are. Then you know why I am here. He smiled at me. He had a good smile. 90 was a starting number, Mr. Banks. I am authorized to go to $150,000. Today. Right now, from this parking lot. $150,000. I want to be honest with you again. That number went through me. I had $211 in my checking account, and no house, and no business, and a dead wife, and this man in his ruined shoes was standing in the mud offering me more money than I had ever held in my life for a room full of paper I did not understand yet. "No," I said. He nodded slowly, like he had expected that, and he looked out across the lot at nothing. And when he spoke again, the smile was still there, but it had gone flat, like paint drying. "Let me tell you what I know about you, Mr. Banks. You have held a North Carolina locksmith license since 1982. That license requires a surety bond and an annual review, and it can be challenged by any member of the public who files a complaint of professional misconduct. It does not have to be a true complaint. It just has to be filed." He let that sit there. "I also know that this unit is subject to a lien for $214 in unpaid fees. Liens can be purchased, Mr. Banks. And when a lien is purchased and not satisfied, the facility is entitled to auction the contents of the unit." He turned and looked at me for the first time, like I was a man and not a piece of furniture. "I do not want to do that," he said. "That is an ugly, slow way to get something I am willing to pay for. But I want you to understand that the paper in that room is going to belong to my company either way. The only question is whether you get $150,000 or whether you get to keep the pride. The paper in that room." He said it like it was a thing, like it was carpet remnants. And I thought about Odessa Pruitt and her Satsuma tree. I thought about Mr. Hollowell driving down to the courthouse with his receipts in a shoebox. I did not say any of that. I did not say one word about it. I have gone over that morning 1,000 times, and I still do not know if that was strength or if that was the same sickness I have had my whole life. What I said was, "Get off my concrete." He laughed. It was a small laugh, almost fond. And that is when the van came in. It was Mac's van, and Mac drives like a young man, and it came around the corner of that row too fast and stopped hard, and the sliding door went back, and Mac Rivera got out with a wrench in his hand. He is not a big kid. I want to be clear about that. He is about 5'9", and he is skinny, and he has a wrench in his hand because he always has a wrench in his hand, because that is what a man carries when a wrench is the only thing he owns. He came and he stood next to my chair. He did not say anything. He just stood there. I had not called him. I want you to understand that. I had told that boy to go home 2 days before, and I had not called him, and he had found me anyway 40 minutes north of the shop in the back row of a storage lot he had no reason to know about. I never asked him how. Some people show up. That is the whole thing. Some people just show up. Delgado looked at him. Then he looked at me. Then he did something with his mouth that was not a smile anymore, and he took a card out of his breast pocket and he set it down on top of my thermos. 10 days, he said. After that, the offer goes away and the lien gets purchased, and this becomes a very different kind of conversation. He walked back to his car through the puddle. He did not go around it that time. I think he wanted us to see that he did not care. We watched the sedan pull out on the Castle Hayne Road. "Mr. Banks," Max said, "what is in there?" "I do not know yet. You have been out here 2 days. I know how long I have been out here." He crouched down by the folding chair. He looked into the unit at the boxes and at that old safe standing open at the end of the aisle with 6 leather folders on the floor in front of it, and one that had not been opened. "Mr. Banks," he said, "why did you not open that one?" And there it was. 26 years old, no diploma, sleeping in a van, and he walked into my life and put his finger straight through the middle of me in 11 words. I got up out of that chair. My knees went off like 2 dry sticks. I walked down that aisle and I stood over folder number 4, and I looked down at it for a long moment. And Mac stayed back by the door because he had sense enough to. And I stood over that folder, the way you stand over a man in the road before you turn him over. Because there is a second right before, when he is still whoever you need him to be. My hand did not want to go down. I have made this hand do things it did not want to do for 45 years. It has been burned and it has been cut and it has been broken twice. It has never once refused me before. I bent down. I picked it up. The leather was cold. And on the front of it, on a strip of masking tape in my wife's handwriting, in a hand I had seen on grocery lists and church programs and 44 Christmas cards, it said, Jabari Banks, 118 Rankin Street. It was 31 pages. I sat down on that folding chair in the mouth of the unit, with the door up and the light coming in gray, and I read all 31 pages, and I did it slow. I did it the way you take a bomb apart. One wire, then the next wire, and you do not skip ahead, because skipping ahead is how a man loses his hands. My brother Jabari bought that house in 1988, 118 Rankin Street. He was a welder at the shipyard for 34 years, and he paid that mortgage every month for 23 of them. And in 2011, he burned the note in a coffee can in the backyard, and he called me over to watch him do it. He was 58 years old, and he cried in front of me, once in his life. He said, "Terrence, no man on this earth can put me out of my own house now." Page 11 of that folder said he owed the county $1,100. $1,100. A tax revaluation nobody explained to him, a difference of about $91 a month. And he fell behind, and he was ashamed. And he did not tell me because he was the oldest, and the oldest does not tell. Page 14 was the clerical correction. Parcel identification number amended. Notices redirected to an address on Nixon Street where nothing has stood since 1996. Page 19. Order of expedited sale, 60 days. Page 22. Commissioner's deed. Sold for $14,000. $14,000 for a house he paid off with his own hands. That house is worth $190,000 today. Jabari moved into a rooming house on Dawson Street. He told me it was temporary. He told me it was a fine arrangement that the man kept it clean, that he had a hot plate. He said he was thinking about getting a dog. He died there 8 months later. He was 66 years old, and he was alone in that room, and the county called me because I was next of kin, and I never asked him what happened. That is the sentence I have to live inside of now. My brother lost the house he burned the mortgage on, and I never asked him one question about it. I told myself he was proud, and I was respecting his pride. That is what I told myself. The truth is, I was busy. I was opening the 4th laundromat. I was signing a lease and arguing about a water heater. He called me in June of that year. I remember it because the water heater man was standing in my shop with a clipboard in his hand. Jabari said, "You got a minute?" And I said, "Can I call you back tonight?" And he said, "Sure, no rush." Those were his words. No rush. It is the same thing he said to me about the key. I did not call him back that night. I called him Thursday. Now I need to tell you about the key. The last time Jabari came by my shop, he stood at my workbench in his good coat, and he took a brass blank out of his pocket, and he set it down on the wood in front of me. He had changed the locks on Rankin Street, he said. He wanted a spare. "Cut me one," he said, "when you get a minute." And I said, "Next week, big brother." He said, "No rush." He was dead before the next week meant anything, and I have carried that blank in my apron pocket for 4 years, and I have never once cut it. I turned to page 31. It was an internal approval memorandum. Meridian Coastal Holdings Acquisitions. The kind of paper that gets signed with one hand while the other hand holds a coffee. Property 118 Rankin Street. Recommendation, proceed. And at the bottom, on the signature line, in a small, tight hand, I have watched on birthday cards since it was a child's hand. Celine Banks, Associate Counsel. Dated the 9th of June, 2016. I looked at that signature for a long time. I know handwriting. It is part of my trade because a man who opens things learns to read the small marks people make when they think nobody is watching. And I sat there and I told myself there are other Celines in this world. I told myself Banks is a common name in this county. I told myself a lot of things in about 4 seconds. Then I stopped because the C in Celine has a little hook at the top of it that she has been putting there since she was 9 years old. And I am the one who taught her to make it. I did not stand up. The gulls were going at something out past the fence. There was a sound from the road, a truck downshifting, and then it was gone. And there was just the wind moving a piece of tape on one of the boxes. The light on the concrete had gone the color of dishwater. My coffee had a skin on it. I put my right hand in my apron pocket, and I closed it around that brass blank. And I held it, and the edges of it were smooth. And it was the temperature of my own body. I sat there until it was full dark. Then I got up and I locked the unit and I drove into town. I did not go to my daughter's house. I did not call anybody. I drove to Banks Wash House number 3 and I let myself in with a key that legally was not mine anymore, and I turned on the lights. 32 washers, 28 dryers. I got the bucket out from under the folding table. I got the rags. And I started at the front and I wiped down every machine in that building, one at a time, the lid and the rim and the coin slot and the little groove behind the door where the lint sits. And when I finished one, I moved to the next one. It took me until 4 in the morning. I do not know why I did that. I have tried to explain it to myself and I cannot. There was nothing wrong with those machines. I did not miss one. Somewhere around number 22, I started humming, and I did not notice until I heard my own voice come back off the tile. And then I sat down on the floor between the rows with my back against a dryer, and I took out the rest of my wife's letter, the part I had not read yet, and I read it under those fluorescent lights. "Terrence," she wrote, "now you know why I could not tell you. 14 months ago, I went to a federal prosecutor. I sat in a room and I gave them everything I had, and they have been building this case ever since. And they are very close. But a case is not paper. A case is a person. They need a living witness who can stand up and say where the documents came from and how they were kept and who they belong to. I cannot be that person now. Terrence, my love, I have been married to you for 44 years, and in all that time, I have never once heard you tell anybody anything. I need you to open your mouth." He was waiting for me outside shop number 3 at 7 in the morning. Young man, khaki pants, clipboard, a rubber band around his wrist. He said my name as a question, and when I said yes, he pushed a manila envelope into my chest, hard enough that I had to take it or let it fall. Then he walked away. He did not say another word to me. I have thought about that too. A man can end another man's life with a piece of paper and never once look at his face. I stood there on the sidewalk with the envelope in my hands, and I did not open it in front of the shop because there were 2 women in there folding towels, and I have known both of them for 20 years. I opened it in my truck. In re, the conservatorship of Terrence Otis Banks. Petitioner, Julian Cross. I want to explain what that means in case you have been lucky enough never to see one. A conservatorship is when a court decides that a man cannot run his own life anymore. Not his money, not his house, not his medical care. Somebody else runs it for him, and that somebody signs his name for him and cashes his checks for him and decides where he sleeps. The petition said I was suffering from progressive cognitive decline. It said I was showing signs of paranoid ideation. It said I had become a danger to myself. And on page 9 there was a consent form. Consent of next of kin, it is called. It is a short document. It says the closest living relative of the proposed conservatee has reviewed the petition and does not oppose it. It was signed. Celine Banks Cross. The same small tight hand, the same little hook at the top of the C. Twice now. Twice in 1 week, I sat in a truck and looked at my daughter's handwriting on a piece of paper that took something away from a Banks. And attached to it, 11 pages deep, was a psychiatric evaluation, signed by a Dr. Rachel Glover. I have never met a Dr. Rachel Glover. I have never sat in a room with that woman. I have never been asked one question by any doctor about my memory in my entire life. But there it was, on letterhead, with dates, 3 appointments. The subject presented as disheveled and disoriented. The subject was unable to recall the year. The subject displayed an obsessive fixation on locks and keys, carrying a collection of key blanks on his person and repeatedly handling them during the interview. An obsessive fixation on locks and keys. I have been a locksmith for 45 years. I have a key blank in my pocket the way a carpenter has a pencil behind his ear. And a woman I have never laid eyes on wrote that down and turned my trade into a symptom. Then I got to page 14, and page 14 stopped my breath. It was an exhibit, a photograph, grainy black and white, time-stamped, and taken from up in the corner of a ceiling. It was me, in shop number 3, at 4:06 in the morning, on my knees with a rag in my hand, wiping down a washing machine in an empty building. Subject was observed cleaning industrial equipment in a closed business for a period of approximately 6 hours during the night, the caption said. Behavior consistent with agitation and compulsive ritual. My own cameras. I bought those cameras. I mounted them myself in 2014, and they had watched me. They had sat somewhere in a warm room and watched an old man wipe down machines in the dark, on the night he found out what his daughter had done, and they had printed it out and given it to a court. I sat in that truck for a while. Then I drove to Conrad Kahn. His office is on Princess Street, above a place that sells hearing aids, and there is no elevator, and he keeps it that way on purpose. He read the whole thing. He did not make a sound while he read it. When he was done, he set it down and squared the edges with 2 fingers and looked up at me. "They are not after your money, Mr. Banks," he said. "They are after the laundromats." "No." He shook his head once. "Your daughter already owns the laundromats. Your daughter already owns the house and the accounts. There is nothing left of yours to take, except one thing." He tapped the petition. "If this court grants a conservatorship, Julian Cross gains legal authority to act in your name. That includes managing your property. It includes disposing of your property. It includes destroying documents in your possession." The room was very quiet. "And it includes something else," Kahn said. "A conservatee cannot testify as a competent witness, not credibly, not in federal court, not anywhere." I sat back in that chair. "They do not want your money, Mr. Banks. They want your mouth." 14 days. That is what he told me. The hearing was in 14 days, and until then, I was to do nothing strange, nothing loud, nothing that could be photographed and captioned. No shouting, no confrontations. Behave, he said, like a man with nothing to hide, because you have nothing to hide. I asked him one question before I left. I asked him if it could work. Conrad Kahn is not a kind man. He is an honest one, and there is a difference, and I have known that difference my whole life. "It works all the time," he said. Kahn asked me what was in that storage unit. I did not tell him. Not that day. I sat in that chair with my hat in my hands, and I looked at a man who had known my wife for 30 years and had never once been dishonest with me. And I said nothing, because that is what I do. He waited. He is very good at waiting. Then he wrote something on a pad and turned it around so I could read it. It said, "Assume they are watching you." I drove home. I do not have a home, so what I mean is, I drove to the storage unit and I sat in my truck outside unit 118 with the engine off, and I turned my hands over in my lap and I looked at them. 69 years old. 2 knuckles on the right hand that will not straighten out anymore. A crooked little finger from a door I should not have been leaning on in 1994. Skin like the back of a work glove. 3 days ago, these hands could not feel the drive cam on a safe I built myself. And I sat there in the dark, and I asked myself the question, and I am going to say it out loud to you, because I have never said it to another living person. If my hands are going, how would I know if the rest of me was going with them? Who would tell me? My wife is dead. My brother is dead. And the only 2 people left who would ever have told me the truth about myself are the 2 people who just filed that paper. The first thing I did the next morning was buy a camera. $94 at the hardware store on Market. Little white thing about the size of a pack of cigarettes, records to a card, runs off a battery for 2 weeks. I mounted it inside Unit 118 up in the corner where the wall meets the ceiling, behind the 3rd stack of boxes aimed straight down the aisle at the door. I did not tell Mac. I did not tell Kahn. I did not tell anybody. I want to be plain with you about why. It was not because I am clever. It was because a man wrote a note on a legal pad and turned it around so I could read it, and something in me finally woke up. They had been watching me for years off my own cameras in my own building, and I never thought about it once. So I put up a camera, and I sat in my truck and I looked at that orange door and I thought, all right, if they are watching me, I am going to watch them. Julian Cross works out of a glass building on Military Cutoff Road. I drove out there that afternoon to talk to him. I want you to understand that. I did not go out there to catch him at anything. I went out there because he is my daughter's husband and I am an old man, and I had spent the whole morning practicing what I was going to say. 2 men. Sit down. Talk it out. I had it worked out in my head all the way down Market Street. I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes, and I never got out of the truck because I knew how it would go. I knew he would put both hands on mine. I knew he would say, "Pops." And I knew that after that, I would have to go on living inside my own body, and I did not think I could. I had the words. I still have them. I was going to say, Julian, whatever it is you tell me, and we will fix it. Because that is what I do. I fix things. And there is nothing you could bring me that I have not already seen sitting inside somebody's safe. That is what I was going to say to the man who was trying to have me declared insane. That is the kind of fool I was, 1 week after I buried my wife. So I sat there. And at 4:15 he came out, and he did not go home. He went to a sports bar out on Oleander with about 11 televisions in it, and he sat at the end of the bar with his phone flat on the wood in front of him, and he ordered a drink, and he did not drink it. I sat in the booth by the door with a hat on and a plate of fries I did not eat, and nobody looked at me twice. That is the thing about being a 69-year-old black man in a work coat. You can sit anywhere you want. Nobody sees you at all. I watched my son-in-law for 2 hours. He was not enjoying himself. That is what got me. He was not laughing. He was not talking to anybody. He was just sitting there with his shoulders up around his ears, watching a basketball game with the sound off and looking at that phone. Once he stood straight up off the stool and put both hands on his head. Once he laughed, and it was not a good sound. Once he took his phone in both hands and squeezed it like he was trying to make it stop. At 6:10, something happened on one of those screens. I did not even see what. A man in a white jersey missed a shot that is all a basketball going off the front of the rim in a gym 800 miles away, and my son-in-law put his forehead down on the bar. He stayed like that for maybe 10 seconds. The bartender looked at him and then looked away. When he sat back up, his face was perfectly calm. He straightened his collar. He picked up the phone and he started tapping again. And then at about 6:45, a man came in and sat down next to him. Big man, not a young man, gray in the beard, a windbreaker, the kind of man who could be a plumbing contractor. He did not order anything. He sat down and he said something, and Julian went completely still. I want you to hear how quiet it was. There was no yelling. There was no grabbing. That man never raised his voice and he never touched him. He took out a little spiral notebook, the kind you buy at a drugstore. He opened it and he wrote something in it, and then he turned it so Julian could see it, and he tapped it twice with one finger. Then he closed the notebook. He said one more thing, and he put his hand on the back of Julian's neck, gently, the way you would with a nephew, and he walked out. He walked right past my booth, and he did not see me either. I found out his name later, Cruz de la Cruz. And I found out what he wrote in that notebook because I heard my son-in-law say it out loud 20 minutes later in the parking lot. And I want to tell you the number. $600,000. 21 days. Now, before I tell you the rest of that night, let me say one thing to you, and then I will go on with the story. If you are listening to this, and somebody in your life has ever looked at you and quietly decided that you were finished, that you were done, that there was nothing left in you worth taking seriously, tell me where you are watching from. I would like to know. I am not the only one. All right. The parking lot. I was 3 rows back and 2 cars over. My windows were up. His were down because he was smoking, which I did not know he did. He was on the phone. Not to my daughter. I know my daughter's name in his mouth, and this was not that. He said, "Baby, listen. Listen to me. It is handled." He said 6 weeks. I am telling you 6 weeks, and after that, there is not one thing standing between us and that house. He said, "Wrightsville Beach, baby. On the water. I told you I would put you on the water." And then he laughed, and he leaned his head back against the headrest, and he said, "You want to know the worst part? He hums," he said, all day, under his breath, all day long. Sitting there in that dirty little shop with those machines going humming like he is in church. He said Celine cannot stand it. She told me once it makes her want to crawl out of her skin. 41 years old, and she still cannot sit in a room with it. And he laughed again softer, and he said, he does not even know he is doing it. And he was right. I was sitting 3 rows back in the dark with my hands on the wheel of a truck older than his marriage, and I did not notice until that exact second that I had been humming the entire time. She came alone on a Tuesday. I heard the car before I saw it. She drives a German car, and it makes a sound like a refrigerator closing, and it came down that row of orange doors, slow the way you drive when you do not want to be there. I was sitting in the folding chair with the door up. I had the 7 folders in a milk crate at my feet, and I did not move them. Celine got out. She was in her work clothes, gray, expensive, and she had her arms crossed over herself the way she used to stand at the bus stop in December. 6 years. That is how long it had been since I had been alone in a room with my own child. Not a holiday, not a table with other people at it. Alone. "Daddy," she said, "sit down." There was nowhere to sit. There was one chair, and I was in it. She looked around the unit, and she did not sit. "I know what you found." "Do you?" "Yes." She lifted her chin. "And I am going to explain it to you because you are going to hear it from somebody who was actually there instead of reading it off a piece of paper." That is how she started. Not "I am sorry," not "Daddy, forgive me." "I am going to explain it to you. I was 29 years old," she said. "I was a second-year associate. Do you understand what that means? It means I was given 40 files a week and I had 6 minutes for each one. And if I was slow, they gave the next batch to somebody else. That is the whole job. That is all it is. 40 files a week." "Yes." "And you never read the names." "No," she said it fast. "You do not read the names. Nobody reads the names. You read the box that says statutory compliance, and you check it, and you sign, and you go to the next one." 40 a week, I said. "Yes, Daddy." "For how many years?" She stopped. She stood in the mouth of my storage unit with the wind pulling at her coat, and she did not answer that, and I sat in that chair and I watched my daughter do arithmetic she had never let herself do before. Then I asked her the only question I had. I did not raise my voice. I want you to know that. I have never raised my voice at that girl in my life. "Celine," I said, "did you see the name?" And she was quiet. I have opened safes for 45 years, and I want to tell you something about silence. There is a silence that means a person is thinking. It has a shape. It moves. And there is another kind. The kind where somebody has already known the answer for a long time and has just been waiting for a room to be quiet enough to hear themselves say it. She was quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. "It was a common name," she said. 11 seconds. "Banks," I said. "On the north side, $1,100. "Daddy, he carried you on his shoulders at the 4th of July parade, both years. You would not let anybody else pick you up." "Stop it. Your uncle." "Stop it." And her voice cracked open, and she put both hands over her face, and she cried. "I want to be honest with you, because I have been honest with you this whole time. Those tears were real. In everything that happened, in everything that girl did to me, that was the one true thing that came out of her. She stood in the door of that unit, and she cried like she was 9 years old, and every part of my body wanted to get up out of that chair. I did not get up. My hand had gone into my apron pocket without my telling it to. I was holding that brass blank, and I was pressing my thumb against the smooth end of it, the end where the teeth should have been. 4 seconds. That is how long it takes to sign a name. 4 years. That is how long it takes to not cut a key. I did not say that to her. I have never said it to anybody. I am saying it to you now, because I do not know where else to put it. And when she got her breath back, she wiped her face with the flat of her hand, and she said this: "Burn them." I looked at her. "Burn them, Daddy. All 7. Nobody is ever going to know. Those people are gone. They have been gone for years, and there is nothing in that crate that gives any one of them their house back." She took a step closer. "You burn that paper, and you and I go get lunch. That is all it takes. That is the whole thing." And I heard myself say, "You used to do your homework on number 7. She blinked. "What?" "Machine number 7, shop 3, the third one from the window. You would sit up on the lid because it ran warm, and you did your times tables up there. And when the spin cycle came on, you would laugh because it made your voice go funny. Why are you talking about a washing machine? Because I paid for your law school with it. Do not. Quarter by quarter. Your mother and I sat at that kitchen table. Do not." She was shaking now. "You think I do not know that you think there is one single day of my life I have not known that I have had that hung around my neck since I was 17 years old? Every room I walk into, I am the girl from the coin shops. You made me, and then you dressed me up, and you sent me in there, and you never once asked me what it cost." And there it was. 41 years, and there it was. I reached over and I picked up my phone off the top of the safe. I want to tell you exactly what went through my head. And the truth is, nothing did. Not one thing. I did not plan it. I have gone over it 100 times since, and I cannot find the moment I decided. I swiped it open. I hit the red button, and I set it back down on the steel face down. "You are ashamed of me," I said. "I am ashamed of what you let happen to me," she said. "And your mother." "My mother," she said, "is the reason we are standing here." She picked up her purse, and then at the door with the light behind her so I could not see her face, my daughter said, "Daddy, listen to me carefully. If you hand those folders to anybody, I will testify. I will get on that stand and I will tell that judge that you have been slipping for 2 years, that you forget my name, that you leave the shop unlocked, that you sit in the dark." She let that sit. "And I will be very convincing," she said. "I am a very good lawyer." She walked out. I heard the car door, I heard the refrigerator sound, and I sat there in that chair for a long time before I remembered that my phone was still lying face down on the safe and that the little red light was still on. 3 o'clock in the morning. Shop number 3. I sat on a plastic chair in the front window with the lights off and the audio file on the screen of my phone, and I played it 4 times. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. My daughter's voice, clear as a bell off that concrete. Every word. "I will get on that stand and I will tell that judge that you have been slipping for 2 years. And I will be very convincing. I am a very good lawyer." That is a confession. That is a licensed attorney of the state of North Carolina announcing that she intends to lie to a court under oath. And once that is in a judge's ear, the conservatorship is finished. It is dead in the water. Khan told me later that a judge would have thrown that petition out in 11 minutes and started asking the Bar Association some very hard questions. I had it. It was in my hand. All I had to do was give it to Conrad Khan and go to sleep. Miss Matilda Faulkner tapped on the glass at 3:10, 74 years old, and she does not knock like an old woman. She was Lillian's best friend for 50 years. She has buried 2 husbands, and she runs the kitchen at Mount Pilgrim, and I have never once seen her surprised by anything. I let her in. She did not sit down either. Nobody sits down for me anymore. "You have not been to church," she said. "No, ma'am." "You have not been to your house." "I do not have a house, Miss Matilda." She looked at me a long moment. "I know what is in those boxes," she said. "Lillian told me. Not all of it. Enough." I did not say anything. Terrence Banks. She put one hand flat on the top of a dryer, the way you would steady yourself on a fence post. That woman carried those boxes out of that courthouse in her handbag for 20 years. She did not do it so they could sit in a rented room out on Castle Hayne Road. I know that. Do you? She leaned in. Because you have been sitting on them for 9 days, and I have known you since you were 31 years old, and I have never once in my life seen you do a thing until it was too late to do it. She stopped at the door with her hand on the push bar. She used to come sit in my kitchen, she said. After. She would sit at my table, and she would not even take her coat off, and one night she said to me, "Matilda, I have got a husband who can open anything on God's earth, and I cannot get that man to open his mouth." She pushed the door. She was not being cruel, Miss Matilda said. She was scared. She was running out of time, and she was scared. Then she left. I want you to know that she was right, and I want you to know what I did with it, because this is the part I have to tell you, and I do not enjoy telling it. I did not send that recording to Conrad Khan. I sent it to Julian Cross. 3:40 in the morning. I attached the file, and I typed one line under it, and I read that line about 6 times, and I want to give you the words exactly as I wrote them. That is your wife. Withdraw the petition, and tell her the folders go to the United States Attorney on Friday morning. My thumb sat over that button for a long time. I want that on the record too. There was a version of that night where I put the phone face down on my knee, and I got up and I drove to Conrad Khan's office and slid that file under his door and slept in my truck like a sane man. I can see him. I can see that man walking out to the parking lot. He is about 4 feet away from me, and he has been 4 feet away from me every single night since. Then I pressed send, and I sat there in the dark with that phone in my hand. And I am going to be honest with you now, all the way down. It felt good. 45 years I knelt on other men's floors. 45 years I opened their boxes and stood back and said nothing, and not one of them ever asked me my name. Delgado looked straight through me. That boy with the clipboard never lifted his eyes. My own son-in-law calls me Pops like he is patting a dog. And at 3:40 in the morning, I sent 9 words out into the dark. And somewhere across town, a telephone was going to light up, and the man was going to sit up in bed and read it, and know that I was still here. That is why I did it. Not for those 7 families, not for Jabari, because I wanted to be seen. An old man's pride at 3:40 in the morning, and it very nearly killed me. I did not know then what I know now. I know it now from the police report and from the man at the hardware store who took the stand and told it under oath, and from the phone records that came out later. Julian Cross was awake when that message came in. He was sitting on the end of a bed in a rented condominium on Eastwood Road with his shoes still on, and he had been awake for 2 days. And Cruz de la Cruz had 14 days left on the notebook. He read it. And here is what he did not do. He did not shout. He did not throw the phone. He did not call my daughter, and he did not call his lawyer. He sat perfectly still for about 40 minutes. That is what the phone said. Screen on, no activity, 41 minutes. Because there is a thing that happens to a certain kind of man when the last legal door closes. As long as there was a petition, as long as there was a judge and a hearing and a piece of paper coming in 14 days, Julian Cross could tell himself he was a businessman with a problem. He could keep his hands clean and his voice soft and his sweaters gray. I took that away from him. I reached out at 3:40 in the morning and I shut the last civilized door in that man's life, and I did it because I wanted him to know my name. At 4:22, he opened his laptop. The search history is in the record. Anybody can read it. I have read it more times than I should have. He searched for how a fire is ruled accidental. He searched for wiring in metal storage buildings. He searched for the temperature at which paper burns. And at 7:50 in the morning, when the hardware store on 16th Street unlocked its doors, my son-in-law was the second customer through them. The clerk remembered him because he was overdressed and because he asked a question that nobody asks. He wanted to know if they had a padlock that could not be cut. Thursday night, 11 o'clock. I was on the floor of Unit 118 with the door up about a third of the way and a work light hanging off a box, and I was packing 7 folders into a document case. 12 boxes of the originals they would want, first taped and labeled, stacked by the door. Conrad Kahn was going to meet me at 8 in the morning at the Federal Building on Water Street, and we were going to carry them in together, and I was going to say my brother's name out loud to a woman from the United States Attorney's Office. I had my work apron on. I have worn that apron since 1982. There is a pouch on it, and in that pouch there is a small adjustable wrench, 2 screwdrivers, a tension bar, a pick set, and a brass key blank with no teeth on it. I remember I was humming. Then the door came down. It came down fast and hard, and it hit the concrete with a boom that went through the soles of my boots, and the work light swung and the whole room went sideways in the shadows. And then I heard the sound. Metal on metal, a shackle going through a hasp, and then that little click. The click of a padlock closing is the most familiar sound in my life. I have heard it 100,000 times. I know it the way you know your own front door. I did not shout. I want you to know that. I did not run at that door and beat on it. I stood there in the dark, and I said out loud to nobody, "All right," because I already knew. I knew what the next sound would be before it came, and it was liquid on metal. A can poured, slow, up and down the length of that door, and then the smell came under the gap. Gasoline. I have got about 8 feet of concrete and 200 boxes of dry paper between me and a metal wall. I called 911. I want to be clear about that because people ask. I called them and I told them where I was, and the woman on the line said 14 minutes. 14 minutes. I looked at that door and I did the other arithmetic. The arithmetic a man does exactly once, and I gave myself 3. Then I put the phone in my coat, and I got down on my knees, and I went to work. Now listen to me, because this is the whole thing. This is the only part of my life that ever mattered. You cannot pick a padlock you cannot reach. It was hanging on the outside of that door, and there was no more chance of me touching it than there was of me touching the moon. So you do not beat the lock. You beat what the lock is holding onto. That hasp was bolted through the door. Carriage bolts. And a carriage bolt has a smooth round head on the outside where the world can see it, and on my side on the inside, it has a nut. 8 nuts. 8 of them in 2 rows of 4, about 4 inches up from the concrete. I got the wrench out of my apron. The fire went up. I did not see it start, I heard it. There is a sound a gasoline fire makes when it takes a kind of soft, heavy breath, like a big animal turning over, and after that the door started to sing. The metal was talking. It was popping and ticking and stretching, and it was getting brighter around every edge, and it was getting hot. Nut 1 came off in 11 seconds. Nut 2 came off in 9. Nut 3 took me a minute and a half, because the smoke had come down to about chest height by then, and I had to get flat on my belly on the concrete with my face turned sideways, and I could not see my own hands anymore. I had to do it by feel. By feel, with these hands. The same hands that could not find the drive cam on my own safe 11 days before. Nut 4. Nut 5. My eyes were running so bad they were useless. My fingers were slipping on the metal, and I could not tell if they were slipping because of sweat or because they had stopped reporting to me. Nut 6. Nut 7. And then the wrench went out of my hand. It just left. I did not feel it go. 1 second it was there, and the next second there was nothing between my fingers, and I heard it hit the concrete somewhere out to my right, and I put my hand out flat and swept the floor for it. And my hand found the brass, the key blank. It had come out of the apron pouch when I went down, and I had it in my fingers, and the wrench was somewhere out there in the dark, and I was 2 feet from the gap under a burning door, and any man with any sense in the world would have dropped that piece of brass and kept sweeping. I put it in my mouth. I clamped that key blank between my teeth like a dog with a bone, and I swept, and I found the wrench, and it took me 8 seconds. 8 seconds. I have thought about those 8 seconds every day since. And then I lay on that floor with a piece of my brother between my teeth, and I put the wrench on the last nut, and I could not turn it. I could not close my hand hard enough. There was nothing in it. Nothing. So I stopped. In a burning room. I stopped. I put my forehead down on the concrete, which was the last cool thing left in the world, and I closed my eyes, and I hummed low in my chest, the way my mother did over a stove, the way Lillian did over a sink, and my shoulders came down out of my ears. Then I turned my hand over, and I put the flat of it against that wrench, the back of the hand, the part below the knuckles where the skin is thin. And I drove it with my whole arm and my whole shoulder and everything I had left, and the nut moved. I got the hasp off that door with my hands, and I heaved the slide bolt back, and I stood straight up into the smoke, and I put both palms under that door, and it went up. The air came in, and the fire came with it, and it went over my head like weather. I fell out onto the gravel, cold. The gravel was cold, and it was in my cheek, and it was in my hands. There was a fine grit of it on my tongue, and the brass was still in my teeth. Somewhere behind me a box let go, and something white went up past my face, turning going gray, going nothing. The security light was on. It had one bulb out. It has always had one bulb out. A dog was barking a long way off. And out at the mouth of the row, a set of taillights was backing away slow, careful, both hands on the wheel, the way a man drives when he does not want to hit anything. Beep, beep, beep. That was the first thing. Before the light, before the pain, before I knew my own name, there was that sound going along steady like a man tapping a nail. Then the pain. My chest felt like somebody had packed it with hot gravel. My throat was gone. When I tried to swallow, nothing worked. And then I heard a voice out in the hall, and it was saying my name to somebody, and it was a voice I knew. Pops. He is a fighter, my Pops. And I did not open my eyes. I want to tell you how that decision got made, and the truth is, it did not. Nobody decided anything. 45 years of kneeling in strange rooms with my mouth shut, and my body just did what it does. It went still. The door opened. He is stable, a woman said. Low voice, steady. The smoke did a lot of damage, and the oxygen loss did more. He has not responded to anything since they brought him in. But he could wake up. That was my daughter. He could, or he could stay like this. Somebody sat down. Somebody else did not. Baby, Julian said, go call your mother's church people. They keep calling the desk. Somebody has got to tell them something. And she went. My child stood in a room with her father dying in front of her, and a man told her to go make a phone call, and she went. The door clicked, and then I heard a chair being dragged across the floor right up close to the bed, and I heard him sit down in it, and I felt his breath on the side of my face. "Well," he said, just like that, soft, almost kind. "Look at you." I did not move. I want you to understand what that took. He was 6 inches from my throat. I have carried safe doors that weighed 400 pounds. These hands have been doing that since before he was born. I lay there like a dead man. "You know what I keep coming back to," he said. "Your hands." He was quiet a second. "First time Celine brought me to that shop. 19 years old I am not, but you know what I mean, I was young. And you came out from behind that counter, and you put out your hand and I shook it. And I went home that night, and I sat in my car, and I could not stop thinking about it. I had never touched a hand like that in my life." He laughed a little. "Not mean, that is the thing, not mean." And I remember thinking, this girl is going to spend her entire life apologizing for this man. The machine went beep. "You want to know what she says about you? She does not say anything. That is the whole trick. 12 years, and she has never once brought you up in a room that mattered." He shifted in the chair. "Except one time. She told me the humming makes her want to crawl out of her skin. Her own daddy, standing there in the middle of all those machines going around and around humming like he is in church." He let out a breath. "I always thought that was sad." He was quiet a while. "She took me down there one time," he said, "to count, late after close. She wanted me to see it, I think. I think she was testing me." He made a small sound in his throat. "2 of us at a folding table with a bucket between us. And she is rolling them into those little paper tubes 40 to a tube, and she is fast. She has still got it in her fingers, and she is laughing." A pause. "And I am sitting there with my hands going green." Another pause. "Green. That is what it does, you know. It gets on you." Something ran out of the corner of my eye and went down into my ear, and it sat there, and I could not wipe it. I did not swallow. I did not breathe wrong. A man can hold very still if the alternative is worse. Somebody walked past in the hall. He waited until they were gone. "I am not a bad man, Terence." He had never in 6 years called me that, not once. That is what everybody is going to say, and it is not true. I am just a man with a number, $600,000 and 21 days, and a wife who was going to leave me the second she got hers. That is all this was. The chair creaked. "You should have taken the money," he said. "Delgado offered you $150,000 in a parking lot, and you told him to get off your concrete. What was that? What did that buy you? A room full of paper about people who have been gone for 10 years? And then he leaned in, and his voice got very quiet and very gentle, and he said the thing I am going to hear for the rest of my life. "You did not lose anything last night, Pops. That is what nobody understands about you. You never had anything to lose. A shed full of quarters and a dead wife's paperwork." He put his hand on my arm. "That is the difference between you and me," he said. "I had a life." Then he stood up. I heard paper. I heard the snap of a briefcase, and I heard him set something on the tray table beside my head. And I heard a lid come off a little tin. He took my right hand. He held it in both of his hands, the way he did that first day in the living room with the lawyer standing by the fireplace. He turned it over. He straightened out my fingers one at a time, and 2 of them do not straighten anymore, and he had to work at it. And he pressed my thumb into the ink. Then he rolled it onto the paper, side to side, careful, the way I taught a 5-year-old girl to do it at my workbench with a stamp pad one rainy Saturday so she could make a picture of her own hand. "Consent to appointment of conservator," he said out loud to nobody, the way a man reads a grocery list. "Voluntary. Executed before incapacity." He wiped my thumb with a tissue. He scrubbed hard. He put the paper in the case, and he snapped it shut, and he went to the door, and he stopped there. "Rest easy, Pops," he said. The door closed. The machine kept going. Beep, beep, beep. There was a smell of disinfectant, and under it, in my hair, and in my throat, and in the sheets, there was still smoke. Somewhere down the hall, a cart went by with a bad wheel. The blanket was thin across my legs. On the ceiling, there was a water stain shaped like the state of Ohio, and my eyes had been closed for so long that when I finally opened them, the light came in like something breaking. I turned my head. There is a window in those rooms. a long one, with a blind that looks out on the nurse's station. The blind was open, and a woman was standing on the other side of that glass, with a chart held against her chest, and her eyes locked on mine. And she was not moving, and she was not surprised. She had been standing there the entire time. "Call them," I said. My voice came out like a shovel going into gravel. Her name was on her badge. Mabel Mills. 50-some years old gray coming in at the temple, and she had not moved from that window. "Mr. Banks, call my son-in-law." I had to stop and get air. "Tell him I am awake. Tell him I am confused. Tell him I want to sign." She stood there. Then she came all the way into the room, and she pulled the blind down behind her, and she said, "That man put his hand on you." "Yes, ma'am." "He put your thumb in an ink pad while you were lying there." "Yes, ma'am." Mabel Mills set the chart down on the foot of my bed. "I have been doing this 31 years, she said. "I have seen sons take rings off their mother's fingers before the body was cold. I have never seen that. Will you say so?" "To who?" "To anybody who asks." She looked at me a long time. Then she went out, and I heard the lock go over on that door, and about 10 minutes later she came back with a phone and a legal pad and a cup of ice chips, and she said, "Who first?" "Mac Rivera came at 4 in the afternoon. He came in fast with his hat in his hand, and when he saw me, he stopped in the doorway, and I watched a 26-year-old boy try very hard not to cry in front of an old man. "Sit down, Mac." He did not sit down. He came over to the bed, and he put something on the blanket. It was a little plastic card, a memory card, the kind out of a camera. "My camera burned," I said. "Because it did. $94 mounted in the corner behind the third stack, and it went up with everything else in that room, and I want you to know that. My one clever idea in this whole business was worth exactly nothing." "That is not yours, Mr. Banks," Mac said. "That is out of my van." I looked at him. "I have been leaving the van down at the end of the row at night," he said, "since that man in the suit came. I catch a ride to my shift, so it just sits there. And I got one of those dash cameras in it, $60, and I turned it around and pointed it up the row." He was looking at the floor. "I did not tell you. I did not think it would come to anything. I just did not like him being out there and you being out there and me not being out there." I did not say anything for a while. "Mac, sir, look at me." He looked at me. "Was I on it?" I said. "Coming out?" "Yes, sir." "Was he on it, going in?" Mac Rivera nodded one time. "Clear as day, Mr. Banks," he said. "He parked under the light. Conrad Kahn got there at 6. He did not sit down. He never sits down. He stood at the foot of my bed with his hands behind his back, and he laid it out for me the way a man lays out tools. 14 months my wife had been talking to the United States Attorney's Office. They had a grand jury half built. They had a theory of a case, and they had a name for it. And what they did not have was custody. They did not have a person who could stand up and swear where 200 boxes came from, and how they were kept, and who they belonged to. And now, there were no 200 boxes. They were ash. 20 years of my wife's handbag ash. What was left was this. 6 folders photographed on my telephone. I had been sitting in that unit for 9 days, and I had gone through them with my phone in my hand like a man reading a Bible, and I had every page. And one folder that did not burn, because I had been carrying it inside my coat since the day I read it. I could not put it back in the box. I do not know how to explain that to you. Every day for 9 days, I picked it up and put it against my chest and buttoned my coat over it, and it was there against my ribs when I went down on that concrete, and it came out of that fire with me. It was scorched black up one side. You could still read every word. Kahn looked at it lying on my blanket for a long moment. Then he said what he had come to say. "Mr. Banks, I am going to speak plainly because you have earned that. Go ahead. You have 6 files on that telephone, 6 families. Every one of them can be made whole, and the government can build the case around them, and Meridian will pay until it bleeds." He paused. "And Julian Cross is going to prison, whether you give them 1 folder or 50. The dash camera does that. The padlock does that. Mrs. Mills does that." The machine went beep. "The 4th file," Kahn said, "is the only document in existence that carries your daughter's signature on that transaction. The originals are ash. The county's copy went missing in 2018, and I would very much like to know who arranged that, but I never will." He let it sit. "You can give them 6, he said. 6 is a case. 6 is a headline. 6 is $7 million in restitution and the federal indictment and everything your wife wanted." He looked me in the eye. "And no one on this earth would ever have to know who signed the 4th one." "What happens to her?" I said. Khan did not soften it. He has never softened one thing in his life. "She is disbarred. She is indicted. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, and she will not get what Cross gets because she was an officer of the court, and they hate that worse than they hate arson." He paused. "She will do time, Mr. Banks. Not what he does, but time." "How much?" 4 years, he said. "Maybe 6. I nodded. There was nothing else in the world to do but nod. The room got very quiet. "I want you to understand something. He was not being wicked. Conrad Khan was doing his job, and his job is to lay a man's choices on the table and let him pick one up." And I sat in that bed with that black-edged folder on my legs. I thought about a girl on the lid of machine number 7, doing her times tables in a warm room. I thought about Lillian at my kitchen table with a paper tube in her hand and her fingers going green, laughing. I thought about a man on a tailgate on 9th Street, laughing so hard he had to put his beer down on the bumper because his little brother had hidden his birthday inside the courthouse. "Sure," he said. "No rush. There are things you can fix. I have made my living fixing things. A lock, a dryer belt, a leaking valve, a broken hasp on a woman's handbag if she will only let you. And there are things you cannot fix. You can only say them out loud, and then you have to stand there in the room with what you said." I put my hand flat on that folder. "No," I said. Khan waited. 7, I said. They gave us a family conference room on the 4th floor. Gray carpet, a long table, a box of tissues in the middle of it because of what that room is usually for. They wheeled me in at 9 in the morning. I had a tube in my nose and a blanket over my knees, and I looked exactly like what they needed me to look like. Conrad Khan stood behind me. He does not sit down. Down at the far end, 2 people were already there. A woman in a navy suit and a man with a folder, and nobody introduced them and nobody asked. Brendan Delgado came in first. He had on a good coat, and he checked his watch twice before he sat down, and he looked at me the way you look at a chair. Then my daughter came in, and then Julian. He crossed that room in 4 steps, and he crouched down beside my wheelchair, and he took my hand in both of his hands. "Pops," he said. His eyes were wet. "I want you to know that. That man could cry on command like a faucet. Pops, we have been praying so hard." "Sit down, Julian," I said. My voice was still gravel. He liked that. I watched him like it. He sat. He put a briefcase on the table, and he snapped it open, and he took out a single sheet of paper, and he slid it across that table to Delgado like a man dealing a card. "Before we get into it," he said, "you should have this. My father-in-law executed a voluntary consent to conservatorship prior to his incapacity. He wanted his affairs handled. So legally, anything we settle today, I sign." Delgado picked it up, and I looked at the thumbprint on that paper. My thumb, rolled side to side, careful. "I was awake," I said. The room stopped. Delgado's hand came down slow. Celine's head came up for the first time since she walked in, and Julian turned and looked at me, and I watched something go across his face that I have never seen on a human being before and hope I never see again. What he said. "When you took my hand," I said. "When you put my thumb in that ink, I was awake, Julian. I heard every word you said to me." "He is confused," Julian said to the room. "He has had oxygen deprivation." Conrad Khan reached past my shoulder and opened a laptop and turned it around. It played without sound. Black and white, grainy, time-stamped. 11:14 at night. A black sedan pulls into the row and parks directly under the security light because there is only one light left working out there, and a man wants to be able to see what he is doing. He gets out. He is wearing a gray sweater. He walks up to Unit 118, and he takes hold of the roll-up door, and he brings it down. He slides the bolt. He takes a padlock out of his coat pocket, still in the plastic, and he tears the plastic off with his teeth, and he sets the shackle through the hasp, and he pushes it closed with the flat of his hand. Then he goes back to the car, and he comes back with a red plastic can. There is no sound. You do not need sound. The last thing on that recording before the light goes white is a man standing back about 6 feet with his head tilted a little to one side, watching a door. The way a man watches a fire he made. Nobody in that room moved. Then Khan pressed another key, and my daughter's voice came out of that laptop and filled up the room clean as a bell. I will get on that stand and I will tell that judge that you have been slipping for 2 years. And I will be very convincing. I am a very good lawyer. Delgado stood up. I think this is a family matter, and Meridian has no— Sit down, Mr. Delgado, the woman in the navy suit said. She did not raise her voice. He sat down, and then I reached inside my coat, and I took out the folder, and I put it on that table. It is black up one side. The leather curled from the heat. Somebody had written a name on a strip of masking tape in a careful small hand, 44 Christmas cards worth of a hand. Jabari Banks, 118 Rankin Street. And I opened my mouth. I am 69 years old, and I had never once in my life told anybody anything. Not one thing. Widows called me, and I opened their husbands' safes, and I saw what was inside. And I stood back, and I said nothing for 45 years. And I called that being a man. So I told them about my brother. I told them he was 3 years ahead of me, and he carried me on the handlebars of a Schwinn with no brakes down Night Street. I told them he signed papers for our mother because she could not read them, and he never once let her feel it. I told them he welded at that shipyard for 34 years and came home with his forearms burned pink and did not complain. I told them he burned his mortgage note in a coffee can in the backyard in 2011. And he called me over to watch, and he cried, and he said, "No man on this earth can put me out of my own house now." I told them it was $1,100. $1,100, and a number typed wrong on purpose, and a letter sent to a lot on Nixon Street where nothing has stood since 1996. And by the time my brother understood what was happening to him, it had already happened, and he was too ashamed to tell me, and I was too busy to ask. I told them he died in a rented room on Dawson Street, with a hot plate and no dog. I told them he asked me to cut him a key, and I said next week. And I told them who signed the paper. I said it looking straight at her. She did not look back. Not once. Not in 40 minutes. And when I was done, the woman in the navy suit stood up, and she said some words about Title 18 of the United States Code. And 2 more people came in from the hallway. And it went very fast after that. They took Julian first. He was talking the whole time. He was explaining. He explained all the way to the door and out into the hall, and I could still hear him explaining when the elevator came. They took Celine second. She stood up on her own. She put her hands behind her back before they asked her to, because she is a lawyer and she knew the procedure. At the door, she stopped, and my daughter turned around and looked at me. That is all. She looked at me. 4 seconds, maybe 5. Her face did not do anything at all. Then she went. The tissue box was still sitting in the middle of that table. Somebody had left a coffee cup with a lipstick mark on the rim. There was a hum in the ceiling, a low one from the air handler, and a radiator or a pipe was ticking somewhere behind the wall. My oxygen line hissed. Out the window, a gull went across, and then across again the other way. The scorched folder lay open in front of me, and one corner of it lifted a little in the air from the vent and went back down. Conrad Kahn put his hand on my shoulder. It is the only time that man ever touched me. The federal courthouse on Water Street has a hallway on the 2nd floor with plastic chairs bolted to the wall in a row. I sat in one of those chairs for most of that winter. Julian Cross took 25 years. Arson and attempted murder in the 1st degree, and wire fraud, and a document he executed on the hand of a man he believed was dying. His lawyer talked about pressure, and about a gambling illness, and about a man who made one terrible decision, and the judge let him finish. And then she gave him 25 years. Celine took 4. She did not go to trial. She stood up in a gray suit and she said the word guilty, and she did not look anywhere but at the floor in front of the bench. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. Disbarred permanently by the state of North Carolina. I was in the room for it. I did not go up to her afterward. I have been asked about that. Miss Matilda asked me. The pastor asked me. I do not have an answer that will satisfy anybody, and I have stopped trying to build one. Miss Matilda came by the shop in January with a foil pan of chicken, and she set it down on the counter. And she said they let you put money on their books, for the commissary, coffee and such. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, that is all I am going to say about it. And she went out. And I stood there with that chicken getting cold on the counter, and I did not move for a while. And then I went in the back, and I fixed a dryer belt that was not broken. Brendan Delgado testified against his own company for 11 days. Meridian Coastal Holdings does not exist anymore. What is left of it is a set of numbers in a settlement that will be paid out over 16 years. And on a Tuesday in February, I was sitting in that hallway waiting on Conrad Kahn, when a woman came out of a door down the way. She was about my age, church coat, handbag over her arm. She got about 4 steps past me, and then she stopped and she came back. "Are you him?" she said. I did not know what to say to that. "Are you Mr. Banks?" "Yes, ma'am." She stood there in front of me, and she said, "My mother's name is Odessa Pruitt, 1204 Campbell Street. There was a satsuma tree in that yard, and my daddy planted it the year I was born." I said, "I know that tree." She nodded a few times, quick the way people do when they have run out of the middle of a sentence. "Thank you," she said. And she went on down the hall. I sat there, and then I put both my hands up over my face. That is all. That is all it was. I sat in a plastic chair bolted to a wall on the second floor of a federal courthouse with my 2 hands over my face, and I stayed like that for a long time. I did not make a sound, not one. There were people going by. The plastic of that chair was cold through my coat. I could hear the elevator going. I could smell the floor wax. My own hands smelled like a hospital, and they had not smelled like a shop in 4 months. I just did not want anybody to see me. Conrad Kahn waited. He is very good at waiting. When I brought my hands down, he handed me a handkerchief without looking at me, and then he sat down on the plastic chair next to mine. He sat down. "There is a provision in your wife's will," he said, "that I have not read to you." He took out a folder. "Schedule B. It is contingent. It only takes effect if Celine Banks Cross is convicted of a felony." I did not say anything. "In that event," Kahn said, "the entire residuary estate, the $3,800,000, does not revert to you. It is distributed in equal shares to 7 households." He turned the page around so I could see it. They are named, all 7: Pruitt, Tillery, Hollowell, Priolo, Mills, Sanderlin. He stopped. "And the estate of Jabari Banks." I looked at that page for a long time. She never meant that money for our daughter. She never meant it for me. She wrote a will that handed a woman everything on earth and hid a trapdoor under it. And the trapdoor only opened if that woman did exactly what my wife already knew she was capable of doing. Lillian Banks spent the last 18 months of her life building a machine, and she built it out of her own family. And she was not wrong about one single moving part of it, except one. Kahn gave me the last page of her letter that day. He had been holding it. He said she told him to give it to me when it was finished and not before. It was 4 lines. "Terrence, when he finds out what is in that unit, he is going to be angry. He will sue you. He will say things about your mind, and it will frighten you. And I am sorry, but he will not dare put a hand on you, my love. He is a coward. And you are the only man in this city who knows how everything opens." And I sat in that hallway and I laughed. It came out of me short and dry one time like a cough, and Conrad Kahn turned his head and looked at me, and I did not explain it, because there is no explaining it. She got everything right. She got the courthouse right, and the safe right, and the boxes right, and the 7 names right, and my daughter right down to the marrow. And the one thing she got wrong was how small a man could think I was. Then I did not talk for about 40 minutes. Kahn sat there next to me the whole time, and he did not say one word either. And I have never in my life been more grateful to a human being. The rest I will tell you fast. The sale of the 4 shops was voided. Fraudulent conveyance executed by a woman under indictment, and it came apart in a week. Banks Wash House came back to me on a Thursday afternoon with a stack of paper about an inch thick. I made Mac Rivera the manager of all 4. He is 27 now. He has business cards. He put the wrench in a drawer and he keeps it there, and I have seen him take it out and hold it and put it back. And in March, with a settlement check from what used to be Meridian Coastal Holdings, I bought a house. It is a small house on the north side, with a bad roof and no furniture in it. It sat empty for 6 years. Nobody wanted it. The condominiums went up 2 streets over and stopped. I sat in Conrad Kahn's office, and I signed the papers, and then I wrote out a check, and when I got to the line where you put the name of the person you are paying, I stopped for a while. Then I wrote it. The estate of Jabari Banks, 118 Rankin Street. The key machine is still on the bench where it has always been. I put the blank in the vise, I dressed the cutter, and I hummed, and this time I knew I was doing it. And it was her hymn, the one she sang over the sink. The key came off warm. They always do. I drove to 118 Rankin Street, and I let myself in. Empty rooms. Dust in the light. Somewhere in that backyard there is a coffee can rusted into the dirt. I hung the key on a nail behind the front door, and I walked out. That key fits a lock in a house where nobody lives. It will never open anything for anybody. I cut it 4 years too late, and I'm going to leave it hanging right there for whatever is left of my life. For 45 years, I told myself that a man does not talk, a man fixes. He carries it, and he keeps his mouth shut, and he goes to work in the morning, and that is strength. I was wrong. Some things you can fix, a lock, a belt, a hasp on a woman's handbag if she will let you. And some things you cannot fix. You can only say them out loud in a room in front of people, and then stand there in what you said. Silence is not strength. Silence is just the shape a wound takes when nobody names it. I do not know if I did right. God knows I loved my brother. God knows I loved that girl, and I love her still, and I have not once been to see her. And God is going to have to sort that out, because I cannot. Some mornings, I do the arithmetic in my head. 4 seconds to sign a name. 4 years to not cut a key. I still do not know which one is worse. So let me ask you, you have got the folder in your hands. 6 of them free 7 families and put a monster in prison. And nobody on this earth ever has to know who signed the 4th one. The 4th one has your child's name on it. What do you do? Tell me. Tell me honestly in the comments, and do not tell me what you think you are supposed to say. Tell me what you would actually do at 2 o'clock in the morning with that folder on your knees. I have had a long time to think about it. I am still not sure I got it right.